Thank you. And our final speaker is Keegan Eisenstadt, who is president and CEO of Clear Sky Climate Solutions. He has over 17 years of international environmental consulting experience, and currently he is involved in the design and implementation of climate change mitigation projects, carbon credit monitoring, marketing and sales of carbon credits, forest conservation planning, and much more. He's currently developing techniques and approaches for native species reforestation and carbon sequestration.
Thanks. Well, thanks everybody for taking time out of your day. It hardly seems fair to be last on this panel, I have to confess. From the Nobel laureates to the deans of schools of law and ethicists and uber glacier skiers, I'm certainly feeling like I'm at the best seat in the house. My work has been focused mostly overseas, so it's wonderful to see that there is this upswelling in the US of experts as well as interested students in what is it that we've got ourselves into now. There were a number of questions sort of cited to us previously before the panel actually got together, and I frankly think none of us have addressed any of them, and that's good. But the questions that have come up really are about what is this debate going to be about? How are people going to be considering what the future, what is our legacy? That's really what I think this question is. We've spent a long time as environmentalists, and I readily put on my green Kermit the Frog suit, as awful communicators. We have run around screaming Chicken Little for so long that nobody takes us seriously anymore. And I think the way to communicate some of our issues has to be simplifying these concepts. And I'm afraid to say I don't believe that the lawyers are going to simplify legislation. I really don't. But I think the scientists and the lawyers, in some odd, perverse way, make it more complex so that only they get to understand it and talk about it. I sit in the middle. I run a company that's trying to promote some actions in the short and maybe even midterm about trying to create changes of behavior so that people can look at the future and think about, what's this planet going to look like for my kids or my grandkids, and what can I do right now in my life, whether it's live simply or whether it's support other people who are making good decisions about resource issues and natural resource use, and how can I get incentives proper such that people can make those choices that are too expensive or too difficult to make right now. That's really the fundamental nature of what the carbon market is, and what these Copenhagen discussions are about are refining what the Kyoto Protocol is supposed to look like in its next incarnation. I think to a great extent, the long discussions about glacial ice, biome BGC and global circulation models, and how the science works has been ended, what, a decade ago amongst scientists? That it's not an issue anymore, but we've had a lot of purposeful complexity brought upon all of the discussion in the United States about climate change. I've been going to the UN Conference of the Parties meetings, these Copenhagen meetings, for a long time. And there's been a lot of years where the US negotiators were not actually allowed to sit at the table. They weren't active participants. And in fact, in some of them, they had pies thrown at them. So we haven't really been present. And we've been obstructing this process of understanding and communicating on purpose. That's changing. I think we should all be pretty happy actually sitting here. There's a new breath in the air. And having worked in climate change for not as long as people on this panel, but for a while, a decade or so, there's a totally different sense internationally about whether or not the US can actually play a leadership role in some international deliberations about climate change. What is the US going to show up looking like, right? Will there be bills on the table? That's novel, frankly. Now, whether or not we're talking about changing the incentive structures and getting things right, quote, because everybody has a different right, the fact that all of us are converging finally, right? I mean, what are we? We're 15 years post-Kyoto, right? More. It's taken us a long time, but societies on this planet move slowly. And I think that gets back to my discussion about how environmentalists communicate poorly. We advocate that there are things that you need to do right now or we're going to lose it. Our planet's over, right? You got to stop logging, no more salmon. You got to stop emitting greenhouse gases, no more future. And nobody's taking us seriously. So we're trying now a more iterative approach. Let's have some actions that lead towards change. And I, frankly, am pretty optimistic that at least everybody's talking the same discussion. That has never happened before. It's taken a while. Let's see. So a couple things about Clear Sky Climate Solutions. What we do is we design projects, mostly overseas, that enable people who manage and or own forests to basically not liquidate them. And in exchange for not liquidating their forests or selling the timber and carbon, or I'm sorry, the timber and the logs, they end up making a short-term, 20 to 40-year term, sustainable return on the carbon that is stored in their woods. All right? We do some of these projects here in the US, but frankly, mostly overseas in the tropics, where communal forest management is pretty active and where they have really big forests. So, and they're under really intense threat because of mostly corruption and greed. The movement of carbon in a carbon market and the price points and what are those incentives and how do you measure, how do you monitor, who controls it, what do the registries look like? These are all things that actually have been worked out pretty well, frankly. And it's no longer rocket science. I don't think these things need to scare us anything like trading financial derivatives. Some people indeed will say that because a carbon credit isn't a tangible good, which does make it tricky, right? Because you can't see it, smell it, taste it, hold it, feel it. It can be hard to understand, but it's not hard to quantify, and it's not hard to have third and fourth parties certify and verify. So, and basically all of the good carbon standards at this point do that. I think if we're carbon trading in 30 years, we totally missed it. Totally missed it. We have to decarbonize energy. That's the big push. The campus this week, we heard a whole lot about work that is going here on campus and the 350.org scenario. 350 parts per million as our critical threshold. Does anybody know what we're at today who's not sitting here or over there? 387 as of February, I believe. Is that right? So we're 390. And we're talking 350.org. That's our rally on Friday. It's time for us to take actions, right? This is the most complicated thing we're going to be doing. It's going to galvanize your professional lives and mine and these people's and your kids. And we can't talk anymore. It's time to do something. So that's where we're trying to do some things. They're small, they're lovely, and the scenario of sustainability, I'll just leave you with this thought, basically. Climate change is essentially, somebody who I work with says that climate change is basically garbage in the atmosphere. All of us pay somebody to come get our garbage, or we haul our garbage somewhere and at the county transfer station and deal with it, right? We used to dump it in the river, and the river would wash it away, and out of sight, out of mind. That was great. Now we understand we can't do that because everything in the river goes bad. Then we used to burn it, and that didn't work out because we ended up causing all these sort of PCBs in the air and people getting sick. Now we put them in, lined landfills, and in theory we leach out all the right spots. But climate change, basically, it's our greenhouse gas. We emit waste into the air, and we never had anybody come get it. Nobody paid for it. We never paid anybody to deal with it. Now we realize, oh, we can't leak greenhouse gases endlessly and not have repercussions. That's kind of the deal. That's where we're at. We're the little petri dish, right? And all the waste that's going to end up killing us unless we figure out how to deal with it. So with that pleasant note, I still want to say we should be optimistic because it's totally different discourse internationally than it has been for the preceding 15 years. Thanks.